Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to another weekend edition of the PondCast, so your weekly broadcast, your weekly talk show here of all things StarCraft, podcast number 57. I'm, of course, just VIP. With me, I'm joined by our lovely producer, Kuro, and, of course, by everyone in the chat as well. Welcome, one and all, to our weekly talk show, our weekly roundup show, even, of all things StarCraft, all things adjacent to StarCraft, as well as this week was a little bit lighter, of course. Last week was intense. Last week there was so much to go over when it came to EWC, when it came to all things surrounding Esports World Cup and Fusion Esports League as well. But here we have slowed things down a little bit. This is the beginning of what? The beginning of the off-season. The off-season of StarCraft 2. Again, we spoke about this previously about Esports World Cup, about how, hey, there's still chances, of course, there's still opportunities of maybe StarCraft returning next year for the EWC, but there is no circuit. There is no official circuit for the Esports World Cup, not anymore, so this marks the beginning here of slowing things down, and this is where all these other tournaments have to step up instead. All these other tournament organizers, I should say, to provide events, to provide competition for the players. We'll get into it. First things first, though, big shout out to, speaking of tournament organizers, to Exalted and those working behind the scenes on Stara Zagora. Bellingen's Elite Stara Zagora, of course, did rev up quite some time ago, but they did recently release an Aftermovie. Basically, this was a compilation here of highlight moments of matches, of out-of-game moments as well, of the stage, of the area. A really nice wrap-up, and yeah, again, Aftermovie, kind of like wrap-up video here of the event itself. Again, showing that those working on this event, they're still promoting it, they're still pushing content about it, releasing, of course, all the interviews on their YouTube channel, not just the games themselves, but all the interviews, all the out-of-game content, and of course the Aftermovie as well. So again, I really do appreciate, or we appreciate, how much work and effort has been put into the event, how much they're pushing and promoting it, and again, it's this kind of care and effort that isn't always put into these tournaments. Even something bigger like EWC doesn't necessarily have as much care, as much like kind of delicacy when it comes to dealing and handling their event and showing all this off and revealing and showcasing all this to the public as well. So really cool to see, and again, much love to Exalted and all those at Bellingen Stara Zagora. I do recommend it. It's again 6 minutes long, so not too long here, and a really nice kind of highlight reel of the event itself if you missed out. If you didn't get to watch it live or via VODs, I do recommend checking out the event on the YouTube channel and catching up on those VODs, catching up on those games. As again, there's just so much content on the YouTube in regards to the games themselves, interviews, and of course these trailers and kind of edited compilations as well. So there we go. And of course, we look forward to the next Bellingens, the next Stara Zagora in 2026. We do look forward to it. So shout out to Exalted, as that does send us over here to our next big event, which, hey, we just mentioned, the EWC, the Esports World Cup. Shout out to Ahmed, shout out to the SCHistorian, as of course he did go to the event itself. We actually covered some of his interviews last week with Cyril. Here he did publish some new interviews with Classic and with Clem as well. Again, these were some briefer, shorter interviews. They couldn't delve into too much, especially because the players didn't really have the most amount of time available to them and allotted to them. But shout out to Classic for stepping in, and I'm not too sure who translated for the SCHistorian. I'm assuming Maddox, but
yeah,
maybe
I think
another.
He confirmed later that it was Maddox.
There you go. So shout out to Maddox for, of course, translating for the event, or translating for the interview as well. This was an interview that was conducted right after the finale, right after the tournament concluded, after Classic's loss. I've been very vocal about how unfortunate it is whenever there is a kind of like a loser's interview or an interview after a said event. The players, of course, are typically very devastated and not in the best mindset for these kind of interviews. So shout out to Classic for agreeing for the interview as well, and again, shout out to the SCHistorian for being very tactful when it came to his approach. Of course, the initial interview was just asking Classic how he felt coming into it, how he felt coming into the event itself. He spoke about how he felt like he was informed to maybe be the champion, but he felt really like he hit a wall against Cyril, and he was very regretful about certain things that happened in the series as well, which is why I really appreciate the question right after that, after he's like expressing like his just his thoughts and how devastated he is and how unfortunate the situation is. the SC historian, he brings it back and he's like, oh, but you did, you did really well at GSL, and it was really impressive to see you winning in GSL, so many years later after the fact, after coming back to the military. Like he kind of brought the question around into like a bit of a more positive light and positive note, which again I do appreciate. I know that Katz was doing a better job at doing that as well. We were very, very cool about this during this year's EWC Esports World Cup, how Katz did a much better job this time when it came to approaching certain subjects and how to discuss losses and how to talk around it, or how to discuss other things and kind of turn things into a bit of a brighter note as well. I do think that the SC historian did a decent job here as well, so I do appreciate it. Again, he was Classic. He was asked directly about his approach in the finals. For those that missed out, for those who are maybe unaware, I mean, these are spoilers, bear that in mind. But at Classic, he did almost exclusively aggression and cheese in the finals. We in the lead talk, because we were covering it and casting it ourselves, we spoke about how this is what we expected, just because Classic did lose 3-0 with more macro and standard play in the group stage. So he went for a completely different approach in the finals, and he was asked about that, and Classic, he confirmed himself. He was saying how he didn't feel like he could go for the same approach, especially in a full best of 9 series, so he had to mix things up. But he does feel a lot of regrets because he wasn't playing his best. He spoke about a lot of mistakes he was conducting, supply blocks, missing pylons, and just some rough execution all around. So yeah, he was definitely a little bit regretful about some of those matches and some of those games. But he confirmed like what we had assumed coming into, of course, how he changed his approach, especially after what happened in the group stage against Cyril in that initial best of 5. And towards the end, he was asked about his motivations, and this kind of is going to be wrapped around towards the Clem interview as well. But it was asked about his motivations, asked about how he felt coming into 2025. There was a lot of uncertainty when it comes to how late the announcement was. Classic, he agreed. He was like, yeah, he took a break at the start of the year because he didn't know what was going to happen. Once EWC got announced, he went full force, locked in, and committed quite hard to improving, to competing, and he feels like he's at a high level again. He was asked how he felt about all these other tournaments rising up, like Fusion Esports League, the Polish LAN, Home Street Cup, the French tournament that was announced, of course, which we're also going to get into. And yeah, he said that like it was definitely motivating to know that there were all these other tournaments to compete for, to strive for, and to look forward towards as well. And as a player, it is definitely something that does impact him, that it benefit him, of course. So yeah, again, it was a very, very brief. Like when I say brief, I mean like 6 minutes, 5 minutes. Like it was a very short interview. So there wasn't too much that they could get into. But again, shout out to the SC historian for stepping in and for being able to provide this content, and a shout out to Classic for sharing his thoughts despite the circumstances, despite how rough the situation was right after the loss in the finals. So here we go. That led us into the Clem interview. The Clem interview was a little bit longer. It was a little bit more broad, or I say broad. It definitely had a different approach, of course. He was asked about a really interesting question to begin with. He was asked about his time away from home. Just because, for those that remember, we spoke about it leading up to EWC, Clem, he was in Korea, right? He was in Korea in preparation for EWC, which he did last year as well. He was in Korea with Rainer and with Trigger, practicing, competing, preparing for the Esports World Cup. And from there, he went to Riyadh, and from there, he went to Poland for the Fusion Esports League before going back home. Yeah, Ahmed, he was like, yo, how does it feel, being away from home for so long? And then Clem was like, huh. Yeah, I think this is the longest I've been away from home, from France. Like, I think period. It's like, yeah, it's crazy. He didn't really think about it, but like, yeah. So it was a fun way to begin the interview as they got into it. He was talking about a little bit of his off race. He was asked about his, of course, Protoss versus Terran, and he spoke about how currently right now he feels more confident in PvT than he does in TvP. I should also emphasize this interview was conducted after his loss against Classic, so it was after he was out of the tournament, after he was out of the Esports World Cup. Yeah, he spoke on how like he feels more confident with his Protoss than with his Terran, at least in those specific matchups right now. And how TvP can be very unforgiving. We spoke about this during the event, during the games themselves, about how unforgiving Terran versus Protoss is. Like, if you take an early loss, if you take some really rough trades early on, if you fall behind, it can be very difficult to recover. It's been something that we've been discussing in regards to TvP over the past couple of months at this point. Clem, he echoed those sentiments and echoed those thoughts So definitely he feels a little bit of regret when it comes to his matches. He spoke about how mentally he was feeling pretty defeated after the first two games. After the 2-0 deficit that he was on, he was feeling very down, and he was very demotivated, and he was definitely out of it. He spoke about how, like, in game 3, he was kind of like revitalized after his Banshee got so much damage. I believe that was the game on almost said Pylon. On Persephone. I believe that was the game on Persephone where his Banshee's A popped off, and they brought him back into the game after a rough start, and then he was, again, kind of echoing that, talking about how he definitely, like, kind of got like a boost of energy, and he was, like, fighting his heart out towards the end there, despite still going down. So yeah, they were just briefly discussing about the matchup, about the series. I think the SCHistorian, he joked with him about playing Zerg, and he was like, nah, I don't play any Zerg, and which is interesting in greater context, just because he recently had a show match where he did off race as Zerg. We'll get into that, I guess, later on in the tournament results. But he was talking about how Ahmed, he was asking him how his decision when it comes to going to South Korea, and how beneficial it is. And Clem, he did confirm, of course, that there's just better practice in Korea. Yes, there are some really good players in the European region, like Cyril, like Rainer, like Max Pax. There are some really good players, but the quantity of the quality of players is higher in South Korea, with Maru, with Björn, with Kyor, with Ryung, with Hero, Classic, Solar, Shin, Rogue. Like, there's just so many more players at that level. So he just spoke about how, like, it's just so much more beneficial to be able to ladder and to be able to play in Korea, because your player pool is just that much larger at that level of play. Of course, is specifically what he's referring to. When it comes to quantity of players, Europe has more, 100%. That there's more quantity, but at that level of play, the quantity is greater in Korea. And so he spoke about how, like, the ladder of the practice is just better there. He's able to practice more against Terran as well, of course, when it comes to his PvT. That definitely did help him. That's also why he's a little bit more confident in his PvT as well, because he got so much versus Terran practice in South Korea. So yeah, he was able to kind of, like, open up a little bit more about that. He was asked about the event that's happening in France. It's on the horizon, and he spoke about how excited he is. Spoke about how, hey, even if he doesn't qualify for the event, he'll be there. He'll go there. He'll be there. He'll be a part of the crowd. He'll definitely looking forward to enjoying StarCraft in France once again after so long. It's been so long since they had an O Gaming event in France. It must have been pre-COVID at this point, and even then, so it's been a while. So really cool to see the return of StarCraft.
I like the way you said, even if he doesn't qualify, as if they wouldn't invite him and just, like, have him there regardless.
True, that they'd probably bring him on as a caster, right? Like, but he's talking about the event itself. It's only top 4. Top 4 is offline. So he spoke about how if he doesn't make it to the top 4, like, he'll probably just go anyway to be a part of the event. So he briefly discussed that. Something, I guess, that's a little bit more interesting, and it's definitely it touches home a little bit more as well. He was asked about StarCraft without Esports World Cup. He was asked about, like, there once again there is uncertainty moving forward about whether or not there is going to be another StarCraft event at next year's Esports World Cup. Of course, like, there's a lot of high hopes that there will be. We discussed that last week, talking about the viewership, talking about the good numbers, and talking about how impressive it was, talking about how there were some higher ups at EWC that spoke highly of it and were very impressed by the numbers, and it all bodes well. But the reality is that there's still uncertainty around that. It was asked, like, how he would approach things moving forward. And Clem spoke about how as long as he can, earn a living playing StarCraft, then he'll play full time. If that stops happening, if there are less events and if there's less prize pool, then most likely, like a lot of other players currently, probably play part-time instead, where he'll compete, he'll play, but he'll probably spend a lot of time, instead of laddering, practicing, doing other things and spending his time elsewhere. Still, of course, like, he spoke about how he still loves the game, he enjoys playing, otherwise he wouldn't be here. But yeah, it's something that he would probably approach in a bit of a different manner, in a bit of a different light moving forward. But it'd still be, traveling to your home story cups and competing in your home story cup and the France events, the Polish event as well, for example. Like, he still would want to be a part of the scene in some way, shape, or form, just maybe in a bit of a lesser capacity than currently, for example. It's assuming there is no EWC. So it was really cool to hear that again, like he'd be willing to. I mean, there's a reason why he accepted the invite to the Fusion Esports League, for example, to compete in Poland, to travel to Poland. Lastly, towards the end, he spoke about his expectations. The SCHistorian, he was like, "Oh, how'd you feel coming into the event? Did you have any extra pressure on you because you were the reigning champion and because like people expected more of you coming into this year's tournament?" He spoke about how like, yeah, other people have high expectations of me, like I don't. Like he was like, I don't try to like put too much pressure on myself moving forward or getting into these tournaments just because he doesn't want to disappoint himself either. Like he typically has more tempered expectations coming into it and just tries to go forward, one match at a time sort of thing. Which is really cool to hear. Clem, he's typically considered to be one of the more humble players out there. So definitely interesting to hear, I guess, a little bit more about his own mindset as well. I'm sure the pressure at times would get to him, which is why he again, just like, tries to take a bit of a step back and one match at a time. One match at a time. And then towards the end, he was asked, it looks like this interview was conducted after his elimination, but before the finals, and before the semis, actually. He was asked, who he thought would win EWC and how do you think the matches would go. We spoke about this when we were casting the event, about how coming into the semis, Solar would be the biggest threat of Cyril, but Solar, there was a low chance of him meeting Cyril. Clem, he kind of echoed those sentiments, saying that like probably Solar would have like a really strong chance against Cyril, but Cyril against Classic and Cyril against Cure, like Cyril, he would be the favorite. And of course, we saw how the events played out and how the matches unfolded. And again, this is a bit of a longer interview between Clem and the SCHistorian. The previous one was like 5-6 minutes. This was like 10-11 minutes. So again, there's a little bit more time there, and I do recommend checking it out to give the SCHistorian a lot of love, a lot of support, just because he does travel to as many events as he can to create this content, to conduct interviews, to make these small docu-series as well. And it was really cool to hear from Clem, really cool to hear from him. Again, part of it was, about the future of StarCraft, or the future of Clem moving forward when it comes to what StarCraft looks like without EWC potentially, and of course more events to come in the future, like the event in France, which we will get to right here. Actually, speaking of, I keep referring to as the event in France, but it is going to be the Maestros of the game, even. It was announced, I want to say 1-2 weeks ago. We did mention it here on stream during the PondCast, and we are slowly getting announcements as to who is going to be a part of the tournament. We have confirmation that Björn is going to be there. We can see Björn showing off his guns. Oh my god. I believe that is one of the photos used at EWC, by the way. But we do have 2 players confirmed, 2 Korean Terrans, Björn and Maru. They're both going to be at the event in France. Really cool to hear, really cool to see. I mentioned before that I was most disappointed with the Bellingen's Stara Zagora because Maru was going to the event, he was going to Bellingen's, and then he cancelled in the end, Maru, because of his shoulder issues and because of GSL, because there was just so much StarCraft happening in such a congested period of time. He chose to forego his invite. He chose not to travel to Bellingen's to Stara Zagora to compete in that tournament, which means we never got Mara versus Clem. But potentially we're gonna get an event with the two. I mean, we are gonna get an event with the two of them, and there's a chance that we finally will get Clem versus Mara. That PVT we've all been waiting for, as Mara, he's the only Terran player that Clem hasn't been with his Protoss at a tournament, and only because they've never played. They've never played. Since all year, they have not competed, they have not played, so we do look forward to it. So again, that is going to be in September. Just bear that in mind. Mark your calendars. In September, that is when the Masters of the game is going to begin, and again, Mara and Björn are also going to be involved. Let's go. A lot to look forward to coming up towards the end of the year. Up next, we have the SC2 Pulse survey that was released. So SC2 Pulse, for those that are unaware, is kind of like the new StarCraft or SC Unmasked. There were a couple of websites back in the day, like SC Unmasked. There was Ranked FTW as well, and a couple of other tournaments. Which helps like provide stats for players and keep an eye on the ladder and allow you to look up certain players as well, win rates, MMR, kind of rate of progression. A lot of these websites have kind of fallen by the wayside. A lot of them, I believe, are just no longer being supported, no longer up and running, which is a really big shame. But SC2 Pulse has kind of stepped up and filled that role and has been providing that. And we use that quite often ourselves when it comes to our amateur tournaments. For every amateur tournament that we run, we always check the players. We do collect battle tags and make sure that they're of the MMR that they say, make sure that they play the games, as a lot of our amateur tournaments have ladder game requirements, have seasonal game requirements, career game requirements, and all those stats we can look up on SC2 Pulse. So it is a service that we use ourselves quite diligently, or quite excessively, when it comes to running our own amateur tournaments. So definitely a site worth supporting. And they have created a survey to reach out to the public on what features they want added to their site. It sounds like obviously there are people working on it, but they have limited resources, limited time, and it sounds like maybe they are not certain themselves as to what to focus their time on. So a survey has been released. You can take part in the survey yourself as well. And again, especially if you use the site, or if you don't, maybe you should try checking it out. And you can kind of have your voice be heard as to what you want to see next and what they should focus on, prioritize, and what features to add. So yeah, really cool to see. Really cool to see. I know I'll be doing the survey myself. For the most part, I believe like we already have what we need when it comes to how we run the events or how we run our tournaments. But always nice to see, just more added improvements or just more work done on the site itself. More support, I should say. More support for the site. So really cool to see. That leads us into 25 years into our StarCraft 2 anniversary. StarCraft 2 25-year anniversary, which is crazy, Papi. It's crazy.
Well,
I say 25-year anniversary. 25 years of...
Yeah, 25 years of ESL and 15 years of StarCraft 2.
Yes, 15 years of StarCraft, 25 years of ESL. Of course, ESL, they would run things before StarCraft 2. They were running things for CS. I almost said CSGO. It's just become unanimous. Counter-Strike Source. I know they're doing events for Counter-Strike Source. And 1.6 back in the day as well. So, again, back in the day, I want to say that the original esports was like Brood War and 1.6. Like, they were both like, in their own kind of periods in time, kind of rising up. And yeah, they've been doing events for quite some time. I think Warcraft 3 as well. So yeah, it's I mean, shout out to ESL, and I mean, it's really cool to see the post, of course, being in regards to 25 years, but like a really nice image that they made, of course, with Scarlet, with Olivera, with SOS, with Cyril. Like, yeah, it's cool to see that this event made, of course, this post made, and especially nowadays, since ESL are kind of taking a step back from StarCraft. I say that even though the circuit has ended, doesn't mean that they're not going to host StarCraft 2 events in the future, right? I mean, hey, we saw that with DreamHack Dallas. We saw that with the DreamHacks this year. Sure, there was no EWC circuits, there was no EPT, ESL Pro Tour, that has since concluded, but there's still, of course, opportunities for them to run events, even if they're just qualifiers for EWC in the future. So I know that they fought hard to try to keep the league and to try to keep running StarCraft 2 events. They weren't quite able to pull it off, but yeah, I do look forward to. I mean, I'm hopeful that they're able to do more in the future. Keep the legacy going, baby. Keep it going. So again, the post was made, 25 years of ESL. That leads us, I mean, speaking of the future of StarCraft, that leads us into Stormgate. Stormgate has had a very shaky history, especially in recent times, in the past almost 2 years at this point, of early access. Stormgate, of course, there was so many high expectations for Stormgate, and at this point, I think most would agree that unfortunately, like, they didn't really have the best kind of roadmap moving forward. They maybe underestimated just how much work would be put in and how little time they had. Likewise, they had a lot of deadlines as well. I think this was made public, how they had certain deadlines by some of their sponsors, by some of their backers, I should say. I think specifically, oh god, which one was it? I think Cacao Games, like there were some that had certain deadlines that had to be met when it comes to releasing the game on early access. I think a lot of people were wondering, like, why they release the game in early access at this stage. I think since then it has been released, like, and they had to, just because of their backers, just because of their big supporters, referring to like the other kind of game publishers behind them that were funding the game and investing into the game. They had to kind of like push forward, and again, they've had like their own issues. I think they downscaled their team a little bit, and now they're kind of trying to focus their efforts and they're trying to move forward in the best way they can. What I will say, I myself haven't been able to play too much of Stormgate, but I think all are in agreement that the game is currently in a better state than it was at initial early access release. There's been a lot of revamps, there's been a lot of restructuring in regards to the campaign. Obviously, there was a lot of vocal feedback about the campaign, about the game itself, about the models, about the aesthetic, and a lot has changed, a lot has improved over time, which is definitely a good thing. But what the news is this week is that they are getting out, so they are stepping out from early access. Now, I try to phrase this in a very delicate way because they're not going to full release. So it's a little bit awkward in that sense. They're coming out of early access, but they're coming out, I believe, in version 0.6. Not 1.0. Like, they're not fully released yet, but they're still moving out of early access. I mentioned before, I just mentioned how they had to go into early access because of certain deadlines they had to meet, because of certain investors that they had. It wouldn't surprise me if this is another reasoning as to why they're pushing to go live right now, because of certain deadlines that they have. There are other reasons as well. There are other benefits, of course, when it comes to pushing live. There are two big ones that everyone's been discussing. One of them is that all the people that wishlisted this game and that haven't been following the progression of the game and haven't been following it in early access, for those who just wishlisted, they're all going to be notified when this game goes live. They're all going to be notified, hey, the game is live now. The game is on the proper Steam store. So they'll be notified, and most likely they're going to step in and buy the game, purchase the game, and play the game as well. The other big thing, I believe, is reviews. I believe Stormgate's, the early access version, had some brutal reviews because of the state of the early access, and I believe it kind of like tanked to the review score quite a lot. I believe now that it moves from early access into the main storefront, then they will get basically the slate will be wiped clean in regards to its reviews, and it'll have like, there's going to be a distinguishing factor between the reviews provided during early access and the reviews provided when it goes live as well. So like, there are like technical benefits to doing this, to going for this move. Obviously, the downside is it's not a full game right now. It's not a full game, and there is going to be backlash regarding that. I would say, I think what some people have been saying, I would echo the same sentiments. The people that have been ragging on the game because of the state of the early access, I mean, that wouldn't have changed anyway. like the people that have low opinions of the game because of what happened in the lead up to this moment, like that, like you weren't going to win them over anyway when it comes to like how you go live or anything like that. So yeah, we'll see how they do. When it comes to their current launch, I believe they have their first act, or their first couple of chapters. I believe it's 12 missions. I believe 12 missions of the campaign are complete. A lot of these missions have not been revealed to the public yet. Like, a lot of those missions were not a part of the early access version. So basically, we have a bunch of new missions when it comes to the campaign. Likewise, 1v1 is going to be released, quote-unquote released. I know that they still plan on revamping one of the races, I believe Celestials. Celestials is still going to go through a big overhaul. I believe that's already public. When that happens, I mean, that's like, I think the next thing that they're working on. So they have their own roadmap, and they have like, you know, their own plans for the future of Stormgate. So that's still going to be on the horizon. Another big thing that is still not a part of the current launch is the 3-player co-op. 3-player co-op, which is meant to be a big part of this game mode. I believe even 3v3, that is still being worked on as well. I think they've added a new portion in the game, which is, I think they named it Sigma Labs. Don't know why they named it that, but they have Sigma Labs, and that's basically like work in progress stuff. And I believe in that work in progress, that's where you have the 3-player stuff. That's where you have like some of the things that they're still working on for the future. So that's like a quartered off part of the in-game clients. Of the in-game menus, but I believe they have, you know, good to go, good to launch, like the 12 missions, like 1v1, and I guess custom games as well. It's still something that they're actively working on. I should emphasize that. Just because the game is being released on Steam, and just because it's being released as a full game, it is not complete, it is not done, and they're still actively working on it. They have released their own roadmap, and they're working on it as well. I think something that I should emphasize, I was talking earlier about how like there are some people that like have a lot of disdain for the game already because of their high expectations and because of what happened during the early access, that they they actively hate the game anyway. I guess what I'm getting at is there's like a narrative I think that they're trying to push that the Frost Giants they're like scamming people, like they're trying to like take people's money and like run away with that. I think it's quite clear that like they are actively working on the game. They do want to make the game. Things haven't gone well for them, and as I mentioned before, I do think that they probably overexceeded their own. They probably their expectations were set a little bit too high with what they wanted to accomplish with the staff that they had and with the resources that they had. I do think there was a lot of mismanagement. I don't think it was intentional by no means. I should like make that clear. I don't think it was intentional that they failed to meet set expectations, that they are still, you know, a work in progress, that they're behind schedule in a lot of aspects. I don't think that any of that is intentional. It's just, you know, one of those things where I think they even spoke about it in a video that they made a couple of months ago about how a lot of them are not necessarily used to working on a tighter budget. A lot of them are coming in from Activision Blizzard. A lot of them are coming in from a place where they have more resources to work with, where they don't maybe have as strict of a schedule to work with either, that they go at a certain pace, and that was like a bit of a shock to them as well. Like that like it's a change of environment, of course, moving from a big company like that to a more indie startup that is Frost Giants, and I don't think there's any malicious intent there by any means. They're still working on the game. They're still trying to push it forward. But again, it is definitely a rocky road for sure. And I do think, unfortunately, that Frost Giant and Stormgate have probably lost a lot of goodwill with a lot of the player base, with a lot of the populace out there, just because of the early access, because of the state of it, because there was just so many higher expectations for the game, which were not met. And I think a lot of people are probably writing it off at this point, which is a bit of a shame. I mean, I myself didn't even play it, but I myself, you know, I'm happy to just wait to see what comes of it. I'm not necessarily jumping at the idea of like casting any of the, you know, early access games or casting any of the tournaments that they're hosting. But I wish them the best for sure. Like I want them to do well, whether it's, you know, Frost Giant with Stormgate, whether it's the people working on Zero Space. I was going to say Battle Aces, but of course we know what happened with Battle Aces as well. But yeah, I do, of course, wish them the best. I do hope that they're able to, you know, achieve what it is they set out to do 100%. It is going to be a difficult road for them to travel, but regardless, do wish them the best. And hey, I'll definitely try it out. I believe it came out, the quote unquote, the Steam store release came out like yesterday. I think yesterday, like a bunch of people were streaming it, like Nathanius and Wardy and Rotterdam. Like I think everyone was streaming and playing Stormgate yesterday. So I've yet to delve in myself. We've been a little bit busy when it comes to casting. So again, we cast StarCraft more than anyone else, which is good on one hand, but it also means we have no time to do anything else. We're busy casting StarCraft while everyone else is playing Stormgate. We have no time. But on top of that, I also recently spoke about how, you know, we have a new pet in our lives here at the Light household. So I've been spending a lot of my free time with our new pet bunny. So I just haven't had the time to delve into something like Stormgate. But you know, I will in the future for sure. One day, Papi, one day. Delve into it. I do wish them the best moving forward, because it's not going to be easy. It's not easy to kind of like gain back the trust of kind of like the gamer base. It's been done before. I think a lot of people, like, they bring up like CSGO. Remember, CSGO at launch was awful, and I think it took like over a year for CSGO to actually like hit its stride and actually become accepted. I remember when it first came out, I want to say that a lot of people were still playing Source. Like they just refused to switch. Like the majority of people just refused to switch over because of the state that CSGO was in when that first came out. Counter-Strike Global Offensive. There's that, for example. There were some others that were brought up. No Man's Sky, true. No Man's Sky was another one where everyone clowned in it, and I still feel like has a bit of a bad reputation, to be fair. But got better over time. You know, the developers, they stuck to it to the point where I believe now it is like a solid game. After, you know, years of kind of working on it and support. There's another that kind of crossed over my mind. What do I think of? No Man's Sky. Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk is another one, right? Cyberpunk, when that first came out, was a buggy mess, and it got destroyed by by the reviewers and by everyone, deservedly so. Like, it came out in a very broken state, and it took likewise a long time for Cyberpunk to also be worked on, to also be patched, to also be developed to the point where now it is like a solid game as well. Like, there are examples of developers and games kind of overcoming their initial launch, if their initial launch was a rough one, but it's of course still going to be a difficult thing to achieve, and wish the best to Frostgiant with those working on Stormgate. True, Final Fantasy 14. Yeah, how could I forget? That's the classic one. Final Fantasy 14.
Final Fantasy 14 is a whole like different level of that, because what happened to Final Fantasy 14 is like, I think it like 2 years passed or something like that, and the game was just in an absolutely awful state, and they just you know what, we're changing all of the like leading project people. We just changed all of the stuff and just made their own game essentially.
I think that's the more extreme example, because you're right in the sense that they like fired everyone and they rehired like for Final Fantasy 14, it was almost like they just made another game, almost.
I mean,
like
they literally did, because they shut down the old servers, just launched new ones. They literally just remade the game from scratch. They're like, you know what? This is not savable. This is not salvageable.
That's the more extreme one for sure. But yeah, in a way, another example of that happening, and to the point where it's now a game loved by many. So again, wish the best to Frostgiant until he's working on Stormgate as well. It's not going to be easy, but wish them the best. I think the other worrisome thing about Stormgate is the fact that they're an indie team. So something that's always plaguing them and that people are always bringing up is the lack of funds, or is there limited funds? Maybe that's a better way of putting it. They do have much more limited funds by some of these other big games and by these other big development companies. So that's another thing that is like a big hurdle for them as well, which has to be overcome. So that also adds another layer of difficulty on Stormgate. Is that ironic? Like, people always joke about how StarCraft is an indie game because Blizzard doesn't support it, even though they could, because they have the funds and the resources. Activision Blizzard, or now Microsoft as well. For Stormgate, when you say it's an indie game, it's actually an indie game. It actually has very much so limited funds and limited support. So that is like a layer of difficulty there that has to be. That is going to be a challenge. So wish them the best. Wish them the best. As that goes into our final, let's see the chat. That goes into our final bit of news to end this week's news of the PondCast in StarCraft or StarCraft adjacent. It is awful to hear. It's something that's no parent should ever have to go through. We did mention this a couple of weeks ago about Pig and the birth of his son, and how he was now father. It was announced earlier this week, a couple of days ago, that Theo did pass away. And that is, of course, Pig's newborn son. We all knew that there were a lot of complications coming into this. Unfortunately, Theo was 24 weeks early, so was underdeveloped in a lot of ways. The biggest way, of course, was his lungs. So he was having a very, very hard time breathing on his own. Pig did make a post about this, going into a little bit more detail as of that. Pig has been MIA for quite some time, especially last week, because he was spending his time with his family, spending his time at the hospital. That's why he wasn't casting and wasn't streaming. A lot of people were tuning in for like last week's Pigaster Cup and a bunch of other tournaments, being like, "Hey, where's Pig? What's going on?" And we're like, there's other things happening. And of course, because of his newborn son, was spending time elsewhere. And we did get the unfortunate news that Theo did pass away. My heart goes out to Pig, to Jared, 100%. Like, he's I would say a good friend in the space, and right now is definitely a difficult time for himself, for Dot, and I would say for all of you out there to give some love, give some support to Pig as well. He did make a post on Twitter and on YouTube community posts, and I do recommend maybe expressing those thoughts there more so than his stream. Pig did start streaming, I want to say yesterday, maybe the day before, but he recently started streaming again, and I would probably advise not to bring this up during the stream itself, bearing in mind that he's going live to put on a show, to put on a broadcast, to entertain more than anything. And I don't know if that's maybe the best space to kind of bring this up in. just try to be a little bit self-aware and try to be a little bit again considerate and empathetic as to what Pig and what Dot have been going through. So again, if you do want to reach out, if you wanted to give Pig some support, again, I think he said himself that like he is actively reading all the responses to his thread, to his Twitter posts, to his YouTube comments as well. So you can leave some messages there. You can maybe reach out privately as well, but definitely be respectful to the kind of the situation that has unfolded. And again, much love to Pig for sure, and yeah, wish him the best. Yeah, he's already done like so much for the scene, not just when it comes to casting, not just when it comes to creating content, but even stepping into a bigger role when it comes to StarCraft. We spoke last week about the proposed balance patches and him trying to take a step forward when it comes to leading that discussion as well. And yeah, right now is definitely not a good time for Pig and his family. So again, much love to Pig, much love to Dot, much love to everyone involved, and yeah, do reach out if you feel the need to, or again, just tune into a stream, just even watching, just to show your support, for sure. Shout out to Pig. As that is gonna wrap up our topics, our news here of the week. We still have, of course, all the tournaments that unfolded this week. We are going to be going on a short break. When we come back, we are going to be going through all the tournament results of the weekly tournaments and of all the modded tournaments as well. We'll see you soon after the break.